11 Lives Verify breaks down the claims with facts and experts so you can know whether you're seeing truth or misinformation. Watch Verify only on 11 Alive News.
Morning news is just a little bit of everything to give everyone what they need to start their day. Chesley does a fantastic job of making it relatable and making it digestible. Crash with Traffic makes it so interesting, and I love his energy. Francesca is so smart and brilliant, and I love the way she researches stories. You're always going to get the most accurate information.
Watch Aisha, Francesca, Chesley, and Crash on the 11 Alive Morning News, weekdays 5 to 7.
Chesley, I just think that he's a great weather guy. He really knows what he's doing.
I love the weather because Chesley has been absolutely fabulous.
I like the way that Chesley will take the time to explain something, and I feel like I'm sitting in his classroom.
The Locked On Podcast is your new place to keep up with your team every day. Falcons, Hawks, Braves, Bulldogs. Expert analysis on Atlanta and SEC sports. Listen and subscribe at 11alive.com/lockedon.
News happens fast. Stream it faster. 11 Alive News is now on Roku. Stream live newscasts and watch on demand. 11 Alive News. Stream now on Roku.
Crash is definitely the funniest.
He makes it enjoyable as far as the traffic, be it good or bad.
He just feels like your Uncle Joe that's on the show, that's out there to make everybody laugh. You feel comfortable yet bring important traffic reports.
Weather can't run from the all-new 11 Alive Thunder Truck, a mobile weather center with the power and speed to chase down the strongest storms and bring you on-the-ground conditions. The 11 Alive Thunder Truck, sponsored by Landmark Dodge.
They come in every day with the same spirit, with the same professionalism.
You can see the passion that comes with their reporting.
Even delivering the bad news is just a great environment that they're presenting to us.
How can you really tell whether a viral story is true or false? 11 Lives Verify breaks down the claims with facts and experts so you can know whether you're seeing truth or misinformation. Watch Verify only on 11 Alive News.
Morning news is just a little bit of everything to give everyone what they need to start their day. Chesley does a fantastic job of making it relatable and making it digestible. Crash with Traffic makes it so interesting, and I love his energy. Francesca is so smart and brilliant, and I love the way she researches stories. You're always going to get the most accurate information.
Watch Aisha, Francesca, Chesley, and Crash on the 11 Alive Morning News, weekdays 5 to 7.
Chesley, I just think that he's a great weather guy. He really knows what he's doing.
I love the weather because Chesley has been absolutely fabulous.
I like the way that Chesley will take the time to explain something, and I feel like I'm sitting in his classroom.
The Locked On Podcast is your new place to keep up with your team every day. Falcons, Hawks, Braves, Bulldogs. Expert analysis on Atlanta and SEC sports. Listen and subscribe at 11alive.com/lockedon.
News happens fast. Stream it faster. 11 Alive News is now on Roku. Stream live newscasts and watch on demand. 11 Alive News. Stream now on Roku.
Crash is definitely the funniest.
He makes it enjoyable as far as the traffic, be it good or bad.
He just feels like your Uncle Joe that's on the show, that's out there to make everybody laugh. You feel comfortable yet bring important traffic reports.
Weather can't run from the all-new 11 Alive Thunder Truck, a mobile weather center with the power and speed to chase down the strongest storms and bring you on-the-ground conditions. The 11 Alive Thunder Truck, sponsored by Landmark Dodge.
They come in every day with the same spirit, with the same professionalism.
You can see the passion that comes with their reporting.
Even delivering the bad news is just a great environment that they're presenting to us.
How can you really tell whether a viral story is true or false? 11 Lives Verify breaks down the claims with facts and experts so you can know whether you're seeing truth or misinformation. Watch Verify only on 11 Alive News.
Morning news is just a little bit of everything to give everyone what they need to start their day. Chesley does a fantastic job of making it relatable and making it digestible. Crash with Traffic makes it so interesting, and I love his energy. Francesca is so smart and brilliant, and I love the way she researches stories. You're always going to get the most accurate information.
Watch Aisha, Francesca, Chesley, and Crash on the 11 Alive Morning News, weekdays 5 to 7.
Chesley, I just think that he's a great weather guy. He really knows what he's doing.
I love the weather because Chesley has been absolutely fabulous.
I like the way that Chesley will take the time to explain something, and I feel like I'm sitting in his classroom.
The Locked On Podcast is your new place to keep up with your team every day. Falcons, Hawks, Braves, Bulldogs. Expert analysis on Atlanta and SEC sports. Listen and subscribe at 11alive.com/lockedon.
News happens fast. Stream it faster. 11 Alive News is now on Roku. Stream live newscasts and watch on demand. 11 Alive News. Stream now on Roku.
Crash is definitely the funniest.
He makes it enjoyable as far as the traffic, be it good or bad.
He just feels like your Uncle Joe that's on the show, that's out there to make everybody laugh and feel comfortable, yet bring important traffic reports.
Weather can't run from the all-new 11 Alive Thunder Truck, a mobile weather center with the power and speed to chase down the strongest storms and bring you on-the-ground conditions. The 11 Alive Thunder Truck, sponsored by Landmark Dodge.
They come in every day with the same spirit, with the same professionalism.
You can see the passion that comes with their reporting.
Even delivering the bad news is just a great environment that they're presenting to us.
How can you really tell whether a viral story is true or false? 11 Lives Verify breaks down the claims with facts and experts so you can know whether you're seeing truth or misinformation. Watch Verify only on 11 Alive News.
Morning news is just a little bit of everything to give everyone what they need to start their day. Chesley does a fantastic job of making it relatable and making it digestible. Crash with Traffic makes it so interesting, and I love his energy. Francesca is so smart and brilliant, and I love the way she researches stories. You're always going to get the most accurate information.
Watch Aisha, Francesca, Chesley, and Crash on the 11 Alive Morning News, weekdays 5 to 7.
Chesley, I just think that he's a great weather guy. He really knows what he's doing.
I love the weather because Chesley has been absolutely fabulous.
I like the way that Chesley will take the time to explain something, and I feel like I'm sitting in his classroom.
The Locked On Podcast is your new place to keep up with your team every day. Falcons, Hawks, Braves, Bulldogs. Expert analysis on Atlanta and SEC sports. Listen and subscribe at 11alive.com/lockedon.
News happens fast. Stream it faster. 11 Alive News is now on Roku. Stream live newscasts and watch on demand. 11 Alive News. Stream now on Roku.
Crash is definitely the funniest.
He makes it enjoyable as far as the traffic, be it good or bad.
He just feels like your Uncle Joe that's on the show, that's out there to make everybody laugh and feel comfortable, yet bring important traffic reports.
Weather can't run from the all-new 11 Alive Thunder Truck, a mobile weather center with the power and speed to chase down the strongest storms and bring you on-the-ground conditions. The 11 Alive Thunder Truck, sponsored by Landmark Dodge.
They come in every day with the same spirit, with the same professionalism.
You can see the passion that comes with their reporting.
Even delivering the bad news is just a great environment that they're presenting to us.
How can you really tell whether a viral story is true or false? 11 Lives Verify breaks down the claims with facts and experts so you can know whether you're seeing truth or misinformation. Watch Verify only on 11 Alive News.
Morning news is just a little bit of everything to give everyone what they need to start their day. Chesley does a fantastic job of making it relatable and making it digestible. Crash with Traffic makes it so interesting, and I love his energy. Francesca is so smart and brilliant, and I love the way she researches stories. You're always going to get the most accurate information.
Watch Aisha, Francesca, Chesley, and Crash on the 11 Alive Morning News, weekdays 5 to 7.
Chesley, I just think that he's a great weather guy. He really knows what he's doing.
I love the weather because Chesley has been absolutely fabulous.
I like the way that Chesley will take the time to explain something, and I feel like I'm sitting in his classroom.
The Locked On Podcast is your new place to keep up with your team every day. Falcons, Hawks, Braves, Bulldogs. Expert analysis on Atlanta and SEC sports. Listen and subscribe at 11alive.com/lockedon.
News happens fast. Stream it faster. 11 Alive News is now on Roku. Stream live newscasts and watch on demand. 11 Alive News. Stream now on Roku.
Crash is definitely the funniest.
He makes it enjoyable as far as the traffic, be it good or bad.
He just feels like your Uncle Joe that's on the show that's out there to make everybody laugh and feel comfortable yet bring important traffic reports.
Weather can't run from the all-new 11 Alive Thunder Truck, a mobile weather center with the power and speed to chase down the strongest storms and bring you on-the-ground conditions. The 11 Alive Thunder Truck, sponsored by Landmark Dodge.
They come in every day with the same spirit, with the same professionalism.
You can see the passion that comes with their reporting.
Even delivering the bad news is just a great environment that they're presenting to us.
How can you really tell whether a viral story is true or false? 11 Lives Verify breaks down the claims with facts and experts so you can know whether you're seeing truth or misinformation. Watch Verify only on 11 Alive News.
Morning news is just a little bit of everything to give everyone what they need to start their day. Chesley does a fantastic job of making it relatable and making it digestible. Crash with Traffic makes it so interesting, and I love his energy. Francesca is so smart and brilliant, and I love the way she researches stories. You're always going to get the most accurate information.
Watch Aisha, Francesca, Chesley, and Crash on the 11 Alive Morning News, weekdays 5 to 7.
Chesley, I just think that he's a great weather guy. He really knows what he's doing.
I love the weather because Chesley has been absolutely fabulous.
I like the way that Chesley will take the time to explain something, and I feel like I'm sitting in his classroom.
The Locked On Podcast is your new place to keep up with your team every day. Falcons, Hawks, Braves, Bulldogs. Expert analysis on Atlanta and SEC sports. Listen and subscribe at 11alive.com/lockedon.
News happens fast. Stream it faster. 11 Alive News is now on Roku. Stream live newscasts and watch on demand. 11 Alive News. Stream now on Roku.
Crash is definitely the funniest.
He makes it enjoyable as far as the traffic, be it good or bad.
He just feels like your Uncle Joe that's on the show that's out there to make everybody laugh and feel comfortable yet bring important traffic reports.
Weather can't run from the all-new 11 Alive Thunder Truck, a mobile weather center with the power and speed to chase down the strongest storms and bring you on-the-ground conditions. The 11 Alive Thunder Truck, sponsored by Landmark Dodge.
They come in every day with the same spirit.
This is here.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and we are in very good company today because with us we have, of course, Senator Merkley, my colleague, and we thank him for joining us early in preparation for our hearing tomorrow of the Rules Committee, and then Stacey Abrams, I guess she needs no introduction here, but she has led these voting efforts not just in Georgia but across the country. Took what for many people I think they would just say I've had enough of this, and took it and has done such good in highlighting and focusing on this issue and actually predicting, I would say, what would happen across the country. Senator Merkley is the same as the chief author of the For the People Act, ahead of his time as well, and we thank him for his work, and we'll be talking about that and how having some basic federal rights in place, basic federal rights firmly grounded in the Constitution, in a provision in the Constitution, because some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle like to throw around the Constitution. This is our moment. Firmly grounded in the Constitution because it says that Congress can make or alter federal election laws. And when you see the over 400 bills that have been introduced around the country, 28 of them have already been signed into law by governors, and Exhibit A is the law right here in Georgia. Because as Stacey so well put it, I'm also serve on the Judiciary Committee, and I was there when she was asked by a maybe unknowing Republican senator about what's wrong with the Georgia law. And she just kept going because as we talked about the group of us, and we thank our incredible voting witnesses that are here today, the stories you will hear from Rebecca and from David and from Marvin and from Kelly are really the stories that tell it all of what's the problem. There is the problem of long lines and standing in the sun and the heat. We're trying to recreate that situation in this room for you. Having no water like we have today, well, that law, as you know, took away the right on a nonpartisan basis for people to give water. But there's so much more there besides that has gotten so much national attention. One of the trickiest, most manipulative things in the law is that it extends the runoff period for only 28 days. And as you know, most states like mine don't have runoffs. That's good, but if you're going to have a runoff, at least give people the time to make a decision. It limits it to 28 days and then says, but guess what? You have to register to vote. That takes 29 days. So think of that. Do you think that's a coincidence? That is not a coincidence. That is an exact recipe for chaos and confusion and limiting the freedom to vote. And it is what a North Carolina court said in describing another bill out of North Carolina, in my mind, discrimination with surgical precision. This idea that you can vote on weekends before the general, some, great, but you can't in the runoff period. You talk about confusion. You voted in the weekend in the general. You think you can vote in the runoff, but this law says you can't vote on weekends. The ballot drop-off boxes, which are so key to so many of our states, limits the number of those and then says they can only be open during the regular hours of the early voting places. And there are multiple more provisions in this bill that are bad, but I just focus, here's one of my favorite, putting your birthday on the envelope in the inside. This is not a birthday card. It is your ballot. And so many voters in the past put the date that they were signing the ballot, right? Because they didn't maybe read every single thing because it was so complicated. And that was believed to have been so confusing that they actually changed it during the pandemic, and then these guys put it back in. So all of this is designed to sow chaos and confusion and make it harder for people to vote. In the words of Senator Reverend Warnock, some people don't want some people to vote. And this is going on not just in Georgia, but across the country. So what's the solution? The For the People Act. That bill, as I said, grounded in the Constitution, puts in place basic federal rights, gets at nearly every single one of these problems, including the Senator Warnock has a separate bill that would get at the way the state is trying to take over the local elections, and you get through all of these. I also wanted to thank, by the way, someone you'll see tomorrow, Senator Ossoff, who's on the committee with us. He asked to be on the Rules Committee. Used to be not the coolest committee. We haven't gone on the road for 2 decades, but here we are, and we said, let's go to Georgia first. So that's what this is about, getting those basic federal rights in place, passing as well as we look at the 1-year anniversary just this week of our freedom fighter John Lewis's death. Passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act as well, and moving forward to make sure that we allow all people to vote. And so that's why we're here today. And I'm going to turn over to Jeff, and then we'll hear from Stacey, and then we'll hear from all of you about your own experiences.
Our founding documents as a country had some very powerful ideas that all are created equal and that everyone is guaranteed equal treatment under the law. And yet, we know that those same documents didn't provide equality. And those often without land were not able to vote, Black Americans were not able to vote, Native Americans were not able to vote, women were not able to vote. And over the course of our country's history, we've wrestled with this issue of access to the ballot. And we've gone through constitutional amendment after constitutional amendment. It wasn't until 1919 that we finally passed a constitutional amendment that allowed women to vote, which was, or 1920, the year after my father was born in 1919. And then we thought that all of the contrivances, all of the shenanigans that had been invented to create obstacles, we felt, you know, we've knocked them down. 1965 Voting Rights Act. We finally, as a country, matured to the point that we understand being created equal and equal treatment and equal opportunity involves every citizen having a full opportunity to participate in our legislative process through the ballot box, the pulsating heart of our republic. So I'm astounded that we're at this moment in history where the clock has turned back, where poor Americans, Black Americans, Native Americans, college students are being targeted in a systematic way to try to keep them from voting. So that's why we're here today, to hear your all's stories. And that's why Senator Klobuchar and I have come down here to Georgia, because the events unfolding in Georgia are at the forefront of this conversation, of this battle for the right of all Americans to have a fair and equal chance to cast a ballot. So I am very much looking forward to all of your comments. It's John Lewis who said the most powerful non-violent tool we have in a democracy is the vote. Now, there are very powerful Americans who feel like they have controlled many aspects of what our country does. And they've done that through reams of lawyers, squadrons of lobbyists, massive amounts of dark money and campaigns, arranging and manipulating who serves on the courts. But now they're going after the most important instrument of all that is at the foundation of preserving a vision of a government of, by, and for the people, and that's the ballot box. And we cannot let that happen, and that's why we're here, to hear your stories and fight in partnership with you.
Very good. All right. Stacey, no stranger to Cobb County at all. Do you wanna? All right, yeah, got it.
Well, I first want to say thank you to Senator Klobuchar and Senator Merkley for being here, and certainly Senator Klobuchar, you have been just such a stalwart on this conversation, and Senator Merkley, you and I have had many conversations about the importance of this legislation. What I regret deeply is that, unfortunately, this seems to be a partisan conversation, but it's not. The process of electing our leaders is not a partisan process. Our selections may be partisan, but our elections should not be. Our elections are how we determine the course and the quality of our democracy. And it should not have, as a respecter of person or party, any part of how those elections are galvanized. We have 4 voters here who are here to speak of their personal experiences, but they speak in proxy for so many thousands of other voters in Georgia, millions of voters across this country that are being assailed and attacked because of what they represent. And what they represent is inconvenience. These are voters who showed up in 2020 and decided that participation in our democracy was not only their right, but their responsibility. This is not a conversation about who won or lost in 2020 and 2021. It's about who showed up and believed that they were part of the body politic. And because we had the most diverse election in our nation's history in 2020, and because Georgia in 2021 showed America what could happen when communities came together to speak their minds, there's no guarantee of victory, but there should be guarantee of access. And in a democracy, there should be a guarantee of ease. I've heard this notion being repeated again and again in justification for the new complications, barriers, and obstacles, that for some reason voting shouldn't be easy, that you should have to work at it. But there are voters who take as a given their ability to roll out of bed on a Tuesday morning, spend 5 minutes in line, and go on about their day. That is a dream for many, many voters in Georgia, and for too many voters in Georgia, that is an illusion. And the illusion of democracy is not something any one of us can countenance. We have a responsibility as American citizens to defend our democracy, to say that race, gender, age, and income should not determine the quality of your participation, that zip code and geography are not indicative of whether or not your citizenship should have greater or lesser effect. I'm proud of the Georgia voters who are here today because they understand firsthand that this is about the suppression of their voices, and that voter suppression may not be as egregious and dramatic and violent as it was in the days of my dearly departed friend, our dearly departed friend, John Lewis. That while it may not have the same graphic character, it has the same brutal effect. Because when voters are denied their voices, when they are denied their choices, we see that play out in how COVID-19 is addressed. We see it play out in how climate action is addressed. We see it play out in how criminal justice or injustice is addressed. Because fundamentally, voting is not about an act. It is about action. It is about whether or not we get to shape the city, the county, the state, the nation in which we live. And so I am proud of the For the People Act. I am proud of the work being done by our U.S. Senate and our U.S. House, because they believe fundamentally that we should return to where we were in 2006, when 98 people in the United States Senate voted to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act. That we should return to the days of bipartisanship that understood that our citizenship should not be divorced from our notion of patriotism. And that a patriotic American should believe that no matter who you plan to cast your vote for, your right to vote should not be impeded. There should be no barriers. There should be no questions. And most importantly, there should be equality in the process. And so I hope what we hear today reminds everyone that these four citizens speak on behalf of so many more who believe their voices have been made silent, but more importantly, believe their choices are being stolen from them. And if we are to do what's right by America, we have to do what's right in our democracy, and that is pass the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act.
Thank you very, very much. And I want to remind people that we are in this community center. We chose this location because, one, we want to make the point that this happened all over Georgia, just like it happens all over the country, and that the lines around this community center was something like 5 hours at one point. And the other thing is that then during the runoff, this was actually closed down as a voting center, and then the last week, because there was so much public pressure, and it was then allowed to be open. So there's a reason we're right here in this community center, and I know David voted right here, and maybe some of the other witnesses here today, or participants, I should say. Don't worry, you're not going to be sworn in. The participants that are with, okay, good. I could see Marvin, that was like it. The participants here had the same experience. So we're going to start with Kelly Benford, and she is from Houston County. She waited almost, I think, 7 hours to vote. She is, and she may not say this because I know how humble she is a retired decorated veteran of the U.S. Air Force, and her sons are both serving in the Air Force. So with that, Kelly.
Yes. Okay.
You're good.
This voting is very, very important to me. 30 years ago, July 15th, I just had my 30th anniversary, although I've been retired for a few years. But 30 years ago, July 15th, 1991, I enlisted into the United States Air Force. I served 21 years. I retired as a first sergeant. And as a first sergeant, one of our mottos is, my job is people, everyone is my business. When I swore in the numerous times I had to re-enlist, I swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and I feel like voting is our constitutional right. I didn't serve, I served for Americans, not Republican, not Democrat, not independents. I serve for people. When I have 5 sons, 2 of which are now currently serving in the Air Force. My other 2 sons, my youngest sons, they're 23 and 25. We vote in pretty much every election. If there's an election, we're there. And just trying to motivate my sons and to teach them, and as they, you know, on their social media, they're about all of that. They are examples to other young people. I will tell you, this time, I mean, we were in that line. In Houston County, I don't know. It's like every election, the lines are long, but this one in particular was extremely long. We were in line for actually a little over 7 hours. It was more like 7 hours and 20 minutes. I got there late, and that was at 7:50 in the morning. I had intended, because I've been out here trying to encourage people to vote, and a lot of people were voting, so I knew the lines were probably going to be long. And we got in line at 7:50, and the line was already around the back of the building. So 3 sides, it was already long, and I'm like, wow. But I didn't know that when I got in that line that morning that it was going to be 7 hours. Neither did my sons. Now, they were off that day, and I'm a government contractor now, so my hours are flexible. However, I thought I would be in no more than an hour or 2 like normal and be back at work. Well, no. An hour and a half, maybe an hour and a half in, I had probably moved about 10 paces forward. I thought maybe they were late opening the doors. And I did quite a few videos and pictures out there. But it was a blessing that people brought water around. They didn't ask us, who are you voting for? What are you doing? I mean, they knew their vote, so we got water because, you know, it got hot during the day. I mean, we were going around the building. You had the parking lot, so I could squat behind a car to try to, you know, get some shade a little bit. And we sitting in the grass, sitting in the concrete, and my sons are complaining. They were like, even though they're 23 and 25, they were 22 and 24 then, they were like 2 and 4-year-olds, like, oh, we gotta go, you know, we gotta go. Like, no, we gonna stay here. We gotta stay here all night. And so at one point, one of my sons, it was probably about like 4.5 hours in at this point. You know, one of my sons, like, they were hungry. I'm like, okay, we checked with the people that were around us and like, hey, you mind if they run and go get something to eat? And they did, so they made a food run to Chick-fil-A and came back, and we're still moving in the line. At one point, they asked for anyone that was 65 and up to, you know, come, you know, to move to the front, even though those people had probably already stood in line themselves a great amount of time. So that, you know, delayed us getting in. I think when I got in there, I can't remember, but it was definitely, I'm just going to hypothetically say 10 voting stations, but I don't think it was that many. I just can't remember now what it was, but I remember looking around. I'm like, you got to be kidding me to be in line that long and you only have this amount. Now, this was actually the first day for Georgia of early voting because I want to get in and, you know, get it done. Oh, one of the guys that was in line with me, he stood in line 3 hours, but then he left. He did come back. He went back another day, but I couldn't take that chance that I would have the same amount of time. But getting in there, it was, yeah, I was amazed that it was so few voting stations. And they actually had 2 lines because they had another line on the other side of the building. So, I mean, we were at Perry Courthouse. They had a line over there, but that line was 3 hours. That line and this line here, because everybody thought we had to go through the front door, there was no sign saying there's actually 2 lines, but it really didn't matter, because we ended up in the same line when we got in the building. I'm like, you didn't get to be kidding me. So, but the people that actually parked on that side and saw there was a line, they probably didn't even know about the other 3 sides, or they may have saw it. They had 3 hours, but yeah. My sons and I, we had, 7 good hours. And if you look at some of my videos, my Facebook Live, you'll see my sons are like, oh, Mom, can we go? No, we're not going, grown men. Go stay here. But this is what we do. We vote all the time. We take a lot of pictures. And just trying to encourage the younger people to vote and for them to encourage their friends. But overall, I think that with these new laws, it would be horrible. I mean, people came out there with donuts and, different things, trying to cool people, cool everyone off. And I didn't even think about going to the bathroom because that's a long time. So it doesn't matter whether you are what side of the aisle you're on. We're all standing in that line, and it's uncomfortable for everyone.
Nice way of putting it.
Yes. So, yes, that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Kel. Marvin Anderson is a resident of this county, Cobb County, and he has been a registered voter since the mid-2000s. He's a security infrastructure specialist for General Electric and a veteran of Desert Storm. So let's hear your story.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you guys' effort trying to get these voter laws enacted. My story is kind of similar to Ms. Bedford's. I showed up day one on early voting, respectively, and it was Columbus Day, remember? So I got to the polls. I would kind of be proactive and get there 6:30 in the morning. I know the polls open at 7 a.m. at the particular precinct that I was supposed to be voting at. By the time I parked the line, there was several hundred people in that line. I was like, okay, whatever. I expected. People's excited for the election, so I just stand there and do my part. Slowly but surely, it would start inching toward the door, but I couldn't even see the front door of the precinct that I was supposed to be placing my votes at. That's okay. So I was there. I was prepared. Had comfortable shoes on, respectively. I was hydrated.
Not everyone does.
Yeah. I was like, I'm an old pro. I get through this, no problem. Right? But it just dragged on and on. Polls opened, 7 a.m. I thought I'd be a little bit closer to the poll. No, I didn't probably move a few, maybe 25 feet at the most. And I didn't cast my final vote until probably just before 1 p.m. that day. So slowly but surely, obviously the elderly and the disabled would get moved to the front of the line, which is respectable. That's how it's supposed to work. But it was a long process. And I'd turn around and look behind me, and the line was even longer when I got there first thing in the morning. I've watched and witnessed people just leave the line because they just couldn't stand there no more. I felt sorry for them, I really did. And by the time I got inside the precinct, it was maybe 8 polling machines, spread around. Now, granted, we was in the middle of a pandemic, right? It was a definite experience, one of the longer experiences that I've ever had since being here, a transplant here in Georgia. I've never seen that type of delay. The Senate runoffs was a little bit better, but my precinct had moved, so I didn't go to the same precinct when Senator Warnock and John Ossoff was, when we turned the state blue that year. But that was a little bit more. When is it long? So I'll say it was about an hour and a half.
So it wasn't the same place that you voted before, and you
No, ma'am.
Wow.
One was at the Ward Recreational Center. The other one was another Marietta Community Center, just a few miles outside, away from my home.
Do you think that the fact it was moved was done deliberately to create confusion?
If I did not check the Georgia SOS page to see what the precinct was for the, I would have went to the wrong one. So I was, you guys do a great, you guys, the grassroots folks, you keep us well informed. So I really commend you guys on that. And if I didn't check, check your Georgia SOS page, respectively, see where your polling is, see if your active registration is, actually valid. So I was like, well, where's this place come from? I didn't even know it was in Cobb County, really. So it was an experience.
Just to clarify, so when you vote early, you can vote in any one of the early voting centers in your county? but you have to vote in your county. When you vote on election day, you have to vote in your precinct. And so we have two separate challenges that they're both describing. So one is that in several counties, they shut down, including in Cobb County, shut down early voting locations that people have relied on. And there was very little notice, and there had to be a great deal of agitation to get them reopened. The other issue in Georgia is that with the precinct closures, they will move precincts, and without providing adequate notice, as of now, because of this new law, if you vote out of precinct, your ballot will be discarded if you vote out of precinct after a certain hour. And the problem, or before a certain hour, and so the problem is that there are voters who will stand in line, who will discover they're in the wrong precinct, and who may risk having their vote discarded because they don't have time to then go and find their new precinct and get into a new line and make it a time to vote.
And I'll just say, this is a strategy we see all across the nation, in which there's so many election day tactics to prevent certain groups from voting. So if you don't want a particular community to vote, well, you reduce the number of precincts, you change their location to confuse people, you put it where there's not convenient parking, you understaff it, you reduce the number of machines in that precinct so the lines are longer, and even false information is sometimes circulated about the day and location of voting to get people to go to the wrong place and all of which is why early voting and vote by mail are an important antidote to these types of strategies. So it highlights the challenges that shouldn't occur.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. Now, Jeff's state does a lot of vote by mail. Our state didn't do as much before this time. We were kind of the normal thing for the percentages. But, so we had a lot of people that register the same day, vote. And I've never remembered any polling place changing. Because I'd vote in the primary. We don't have runoffs, right? But I'd vote in the primary, and then I'd vote in the general. And I'd vote in the same place, resulting in the highest voter turnout in the country, by the way, out of our state. But that's the last time I'll say that. But there is one reason, before I get to Rebecca and David, that it's relevant, is that Stacey was talking about of having this, it is an American issue. It's not a partisan issue. Right. In our state, with these same-day registrations, some of these things that we've got in the For the People bill, we have had consistently highest voter turnout. But over the time we've had those types of provisions in place, we've elected, honestly, Democratic governors, Republican governors, and Jesse Ventura, to make very clear. And so it just meant that a whole lot of people voted. And maybe your candidate didn't win, but you felt like you were part of the franchise. Right. You were part of the democracy. You weren't getting shut out. So, I have people come up and say, I didn't vote for you, but you're doing okay, or something like that. But at least they feel like they can come up to me because everyone's voting around them. Right. And I just think it makes a big difference about how people feel about our country and our democracy in a really divided time, even if your candidate doesn't win. So with that, we'll go to Rebecca next, because she is a resident of Forsyth. I said that right? Forsyth County. She voted in the June 2020 primary and the 2020 presidential election and the January 20, you guys had a lot of election, January 2021 Senate runoffs by mail because of the pandemic. So maybe you want to tell your story. It's a little different.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Rebecca Thompson. I've lived in Georgia my whole life. I've been a resident of Forsyth County for the last 2 years. I voted absentee in the primary and general. I didn't want to vote in person, mostly because of COVID, but I also wanted the opportunity to study the ballot. The last time I voted in person, I created a voter guide on my phone to take to the poll, only to find phones weren't allowed in the booth. I have difficulty comprehending written information, so having the ballot at home gave me time and space to understand the ballot measures, which seems to be written to be confusing, but maybe it's just me.
It's not.
Another more personal reason for voting absentee was the fear for my safety. At the time, I had lived in Forsyth County for less than a year. It wasn't uncommon to see Confederate flags perched in front of homes and businesses and on the back of pickup trucks. As a queer person, I wasn't going to needlessly put my health and safety in jeopardy by voting in person, knowing long lines at the polls were likely in 2020. I wanted another means of having my vote cast, because as a member of the LGBTQ community, the longer I'm in an unwelcoming, even hostile space, the greater chance of something bad happening to me. For my absentee ballot application, I had a couple hurdles. For the primary election, my electronic application was rejected because there were problems with my signature. It was frustrating because I didn't have a printer to fill out the application by hand. And at the time, I didn't know how to get my signature in a PDF. Also, during that time, the mail was running really slow, and I was worried I wouldn't receive my ballot in time. Luckily, a couple weeks later, the Secretary of State's office mailed me an application, and I was able to try again. For the other election, I don't remember getting an application in the mail, so I had to figure out how to get my signature in a PDF this time. Since my signature was rejected before, I practiced writing it out, making sure it matched my driver's license. Then I was able to take a photo of my signature, and after some Googling, dropped my signature in the PDF application. When I was ready to return my ballot, I felt more comfortable taking it to a drop box rather than putting it in the mail. The drop box I went to was outside the county registrar's office and available 24/7. But after SB 202 passed by the Georgia legislature in 2021, Forsyth County will only be allowed to have one drop box for its 150,000 residents. I vote because this is a democracy, and it's important that everyone participate and have their voices heard. It's important to have a societal dialogue through voting, to have politicians hear our voice and know they work for us.
Very good. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I think a lot of voters learned to vote by mail for the first time this last election. It's something we want to make sure we preserve in every single state. And our goal is to make sure everyone votes safely no matter how they do it. So thank you. Last but not least, David, because he is the guy that voted here. Is that right, David?
Yes.
And he is a voter from Fair Oaks who waited for hours to vote early at the Smyrna Community Center where we are today. David.
So, hi, my name is David Walker. I'm a resident of Cobb County since 2002. And I'm here in the Smyrna Community Center. This is where I voted at early. I showed up here on the first day of early voting for the general election at 5:30 a.m. Just like Marvin and Kelly, want to get it out of the way, make sure it's counted. I didn't vote by mail because historically voting by mail has not been, well, voting in Georgia has not been an easy thing. Everyone knows you're kind of on a weekly cycle of making sure you're still registered if you've been purged. I'm the one who checks for my family and like, are you guys registered? Are you guys checking? Make sure you go do these things. But for the first day of early voting, I got here in person, 5:30. Polls open at 7, like Marvin said. I was one of the lucky people. I was able to get out in about 2 hours. But by the time I finished, the other people had it much worse than I am. The lines were wrapped around this building. There was no parking to be had. And Smyrna Community Center has a fairly large parking lot and ample parking in the Village Green area where we're at. And you just had people wrapped around the building, wrapped around the pond. You get inside of the building, it looks like you're in some type of amusement park ride with the lines snaking back and forth on each other. And that was just for the general election. And during the runoff, we do have a online system that shows you average wait times at the locations throughout Cobb County. And it was to the point where it was easier for me to drive to the other side of Cobb County, and I'm about 5 minutes from this location, than it was to come to here when this location was open for early voting. So the drive time, counting the drive time, the vote time, and getting back, I finished before I would have finished if I had come down to my nearest polling location for early voting.
Wow.
And I did that trip twice with my wife because she also saw the same thing, and it's just, well, let's just go do this item. And it becomes really inconvenient because you have to worry about things like childcare. Mine is not as established as Kelly's are, but when you have a 10-year-old and you're having to keep them occupied while you're in line for about 30 minutes or longer, depending on where you're at. And like Marvin said, you can't, and well, Rebecca said, you can't bring electronics into the thing.
That's right. Oh.
And you get a very stern talking to about having a phone or something to, as you're trying to keep someone occupied. Yeah. The other part of this is during the primary, my wife went to vote out in East Cobb. And if someone around here, East Cobb is not necessarily a minority area. It is known just to be very suburban and such. Easy access of voting. My wife went there. She was there for 6 hours for what normally takes maybe an hour getting there and back. And once again, because you can't have phones or any access, I'm wondering what's going on with her. I haven't heard from her in hours. Yeah. Wondering if she's okay. And then, so I'm scrambling to, change our plans, go pick up child from daycare, camps, and things like that. Because, you're in the line for that long. You don't want to jump out of it to go say what's happening because you don't want to go back to the end of the line or just leave altogether. So she got there about 2, and I'm 8 o'clock. I'm like, what's going on? What happened? I took care of those things, but it shouldn't be this way.
Wow.
I've been in Cobb for a long time. I remember when it was like you said, there were more precincts. You could just go to your local precinct on election day, then vote before work, after work, getting home is fine, then leave and not have to take a day off from work, plan around it, find someone to watch child or whatnot. And kind of just watch the polls move away to more inconvenient locations, change, split, and it's been something else over the past 16 years or so.
Well, thanks for not giving up. Okay, we'll start with Stacey, Leader Abrams here, and then Jeff. I've talked enough, so let them ask some questions.
Well, I want to pose this question both to Kelly and to David. So one of the challenges with this new law is that it eliminates access to funding for election workers. Basically, in 2020, $30 million came into the state to support polling locations, election workers, and counties. And those dollars were distributed to Democratic-run counties, Republican-run counties, urban, rural, suburban. It is now unlawful for counties to accept those resources. They cannot have those dollars. And as we know, in the state of Georgia, we have a very fiscally restrictive approach to financing the needs of our communities. I'd love to hear in fact, I would open it up to everyone, but do you believe that with even fewer resources coming into counties, like a Houston County and a Cobb County, do you believe that election workers will be able to take time out of their process to come outside and deliver water, which is what the law would require if water was to be distributed, that they will have the ability to provide the signage and the updates if they have if the state of Georgia sees $30 million pulled out of the system in the next major election cycle?
I think I believe it's a very big problem because we didn't have that many people out there giving out water. And I could see that being a disaster. I mean, just simply put, yes. Without those additional funds, because there weren't that many people.
Yeah, there wasn't that many poll workers at my location as well.
No. And I believe Houston County is a Republican-ran county, so you would think even there it would be better, but it wasn't because everybody came out.
And there are a bunch of seniors there in line too.
Oh, yes. When I saw the seniors come up, I mean, I felt good, I understood, but I was like, God Almighty, I here 3 hours. We got here all night.
And just for context, Houston County has one of the largest populations of retired veterans in the state. And so it is a major, when you hear her say that this is a problem, you're talking about people who served our nation, who are facing some of the most egregious outcomes from these restrictive laws.
That's right.
No, I agree. I've seen just the lack of poll workers and how busy they get with that many people, just being able to help them and kind of answer questions, help people get the right precincts if they're not in the right precincts. And when you're talking about having someone to go out and just do a water line, especially if the lines that we've been getting, that's someone going out, walking miles every few hours to kind of hand out and make sure everyone's okay.
And then they pulled $30 million, and this is statewide budget.
So what happened in 2020, organizations like Fair Fight and others helped to basically apply for grants across the country to support elections here. And it amounted to more than $30 million in response to the investment made across the board. It is now unlawful for counties and their election boards to accept those dollars to even apply for them. There is no provision in state law to replace lost funds.
And the law says that you can give water out, but nothing dictates that you have to. So, as a worker, so there's nothing that says if the legislation doesn't force an action, there's no one that says we have to do it. Right. So, it's just, yeah.
And so to clarify Rebecca's point, the law, Senator, says that only election workers can hand out food and water, but there's nothing to compel them to do so. The law says that you may have an unmanned station with water, but there's nothing to require that you have it. And at some of our precinct locations, there's nowhere to put it.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And so there is a provision that is permissive, but does not require it. And the fact that you could do something doesn't mean you can do something.
Okay.
Well, I just want to make good trouble in the lines next time.
Rebecca, I want to go back to your story about the challenge of having to put a signature into digital form. Is that because you had to apply online to get the absentee ballot?
Yeah, for the application, I applied online. I didn't know if an application would be mailed to me. It wasn't communicated clearly. I found out later that I had lots of them mailed to me, but I didn't know that at the time, and I knew that there were issues with the mail, and I wanted to get my application in early to go through the whole process.
Yeah. Well, what your story about, like the pleasure of kind of working on the ballot at your home in order to kind of understand the issues. Mm-hmm. I discovered the first time I ran for the Oregon House, and I'm knocking on doors and I'm asking people, what's the issue that affects you most? The people said, well, I want you to know the thing I like most is I get to vote by mail, because I get to sit at the kitchen table and I get to talk with my family, and I get to introduce my kids to the notion of voting. And plus, in Oregon, we have ballot measures, and they can be really complicated, and you have to study all the arguments pro and con. And but isn't there a provision in the new Georgia law that says if you sit at the kitchen table and you see somebody else in your family fill out an oval, you've committed a felony?
We won't make David answer that. We'll let Stacey.
David, do you want to report?
I defer to the expert.
I will say this. There is language in the law that makes it very difficult for you to receive assistance. And the issue is, because this is untested language in Georgia, it's both what the law requires and how it can be interpreted. There are a number of folks who live in blended families, or who just happen to have friends who don't have, significant others. And under this law, there is a very real concern that people will run afoul of the letter of the law, not intending to violate either its spirit or its intent.
Well, in that regard, the fear about how this may unfold, I was thinking about your stories about being at the ballot places. And then this new law allows any one person to challenge the legitimacy of every single person voting.
Yeah.
Can we? Yeah. I mean, isn't that a massive form of intimidation and confusion? It seems like that just makes what you all described as a complicated and difficult process that much more complicated and difficult. And while I'm commenting on that, I was struck by so many provisions designed in different ways to affect the ease of vote by mail, not making it easier, making it harder. And there's a mantra that some of my colleagues have taken up in Washington, D.C., that says all of these restrictions are about making it easier to vote and harder to cheat. And I'm like, find me a provision in there that makes it easier to vote. It looks like there's like 25 provisions to make it harder to vote, especially early voting and vote by mail. So
yeah, that's a provision, right, that allows one voter to challenge, what, 350,000 or so, a huge number.
Just to, again, clarify, and I would love to hear your response. So,
Sure.
What I would love to know is how you all would respond. Under Georgia law, there is the voter challenge provision, which means that one person can, on their own motion, challenge whether you have the legitimate right to vote in the state of Georgia. The onus is then on you to prove that you have the right to vote. They don't have to provide evidence.
Nothing. No evidence.
They just have to challenge you. They have to have a good faith basis for challenging you. But upon doing so, it's on you to prove that you have the right to vote. Thinking about your voting experience, but also the people that you know, how likely are you, or how likely are people who don't really vote that frequently, how likely do you think they would be to participate if they think that if they get challenged, they've got to go to court to prove that they have the right to vote? Do you think they would stay engaged in the process? What would your sons do?
My son.
Okay, your sons maybe.
They probably would not. I mean, and they do. They like voting. They've been voting since they, initially turned 18 and could vote. But no, they probably like, I'm not going to court for that. And they're pretty good guys, but they wouldn't do that. And if you could clarify, how do they do that? Would they challenge you in line, or?
They would file a challenge with the Board of Registrars, basically to say they don't think you have the right to vote.
And they'll sing you out by name.
Yes.
First name, last name.
But even though they've never met you.
Even though they never met me.
They would know. They didn't see anything you did. They didn't.
So if you got a change of address form, so you're in Houston County, you are temporarily relocated across the river in Alabama. You change your address, but you don't change your residence. You just happen to be gone, and you don't want your sons gathering your mail because you know you may never see it again.
Right.
They can use that and argue that you no longer live in the state of Georgia and challenge your right to be a voter.
Well, I know one issue I have, and we have fought this battle a lot, and we're still fighting it. My youngest son's middle name is Bernard, B-R-E-N-A-R-D. But on everything, it comes back Bernard. And I've been worried and ready to fight at the polls, like, you keep doing this. It's not him, this is his license. And another issue with my sons, with you saying that, my children were born abroad. So they don't have a regular birth certificate.
You're a veteran, is that why?
I'm a veteran. We were stationed in Panama overseas, so they have birth abroad, certificate. And I can see it's some Joe Knucklehead talking about they can't vote.
Okay. I think they're even worse than knuckleheads sometimes. So I just one last. I know they want. I see they're doing this thing with their voice. It's very subtle, Tommy. And I guess David, since this is your place and this is where you vote. I mean, I was listening carefully to what you said about how you might want to vote by mail, but you've lost some trust here with the election officials, obviously, with what you've seen and things getting worse, and you want to be able to, keep your options open, I'm sure, for the future. And one of the things in this law that we haven't discussed is how it also takes the power, basically. There was this state elections board, and the legislature said, oh, hey, we're going to take off, 2/3 of them, and we're going to put our own people on. And wait, it gets weirder. Then they said, if we find some violations, who knows what it could be, right? The water in the wrong place, or the this or that. If we find 3 technical things, then we can come in and take over the stuff from your local election officials. So this is in this bill. And I guess given what you just told me about how you've been seeing this over 16 years and the change, just how that makes you feel and what trouble you think they could be making by doing that and trying to take away the power from the local people who I think, as you saw from this election, are trying to do their jobs. So.
Like I said, I've watched Cobb County change. This is one of the first times I've ever seen us have a democratically led Board of Elections, and this law seems tailor-made to just counteract that board, because I know we will be able to exercise our rights to the maximum allowed by the new laws in Georgia because of that. And like you said, if they find just a few instances of issues, they're going to swoop in, take over, and then try to discount my my vote.
Yeah, we can't let that happen. No.
And Reverend Warnock actually has a bill to fix this that, should be included in the big bill once we move on it. I guess my last thing would just be of the veterans here, just, you served our country and, why this matters to you so much for our democracy.
Are you asking?
Both you, yeah.
Oh, it's a fundamental right, as what people have bled and died for in the history of this country, and we can't let that be left behind and just kind of dismiss when it comes to exercising your civic duty to participate in this democracy. I mean, them threatening that to this day. And, I pay attention. I see what you guys are doing. The better angels in Congress and Stacey Abrams.
Yeah.
And then listen to the other side. Just have an optimistic view. Okay, try to make sense, right? They're not making any sense. I mean, they're not.
Well, I'm thinking when you signed up, there wasn't a waiting line, right?
Right.
There wasn't a 4-hour, 7-hour
4
waiting
hours or
line.
7
And when
hours.
you want to exercise your right to vote after serving our country, there shouldn't be a waiting line to vote.
Right.
That's right. We understand, most military people understand hurry up and wait. So even getting in that line, I understood this is another hurry up and wait situation. But the average American who has not served in the military in any capacity does not understand hurry up and wait.
Like, what are you talking about? What would that
7
be?
hours then, that was the longest, but
That
even
was
for
long.
the Senate runoff, I mean, it was like 2 hours, but
Yeah.
it still felt a lot better than the 7.
Yeah.
But that's our constitutional right. We swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and that is one of them. And that's something everybody can do. It's a voice for every person.
Yeah. All right, Stacey's going to say a few words at the end, Jeff, and then I'll close it.
Well, I once again want to say thank you to Rebecca and David and Marvin and Kelly for being here. And I want you all to understand how deeply we get how difficult this is. That this law will make it harder, Rebecca, next time that you want to apply for an absentee ballot. Particularly for members of the LGBTQ community, being forced to send in your ID or some form of identification can make it much more difficult to participate in our elections. The signature requirement is now gone, but it's been replaced with new hurdles and new obstacles. We know that the long line that was here, they will point to the provision in the law that says, well, they will correct it, but they won't correct it until the next election cycle, which means that a 7-hour line doesn't end the next day. There is no requirement for them to fix it in the election cycle when it's occurring. I know that there is language in the bill that is supposed to make it easier for some to vote, and it does indeed expand access, but it expands access for a narrow group of people by taking away opportunities for so many others. And that's the problem. I'm sitting here with 2 extraordinary senators from Minnesota and Oregon who have very different laws on their books about how voting happens, but the baseline is that they encourage voting. That in Oregon and Minnesota, the intention is for every voter who wants to be engaged to have the ability. And unfortunately, we live in a state that has the power to do the same. We have some good laws, but what we have created are so many hurdles and obstacles to those laws that only those who are considered convenient voters have the ability to navigate it. And let's be very clear. These laws target the diversity that is Georgia.
That's right.
These laws are targeted, and they specifically have the intent to undermine participation by communities of color, by the marginalized and the disadvantaged, and that is wrong. When we hear the argument that it makes it harder to cheat and easier to vote, it does not make it easier to vote. It makes it easier to lie about what happened in 2020.
That's right.
And there was no cheating, despite the consternation and conspiracy theories. But what we do know, if there was any form of cheating, it is cheating Georgians out of the ability to fully participate in their elections going forward. And so we are grateful to you. As Georgians, I am proud to have you here. I'm proud of your perseverance, of your willingness to keep fighting. Thank you to your children for not just abandoning you in line. But more than anything, I want to thank you for being in this fight with us, because this is for the people. And if Georgia can be the beginning of making sure that no matter where you live in this country, your access to democracy has a baseline, a foundation. We can always make it better. I mean, not that everyone can be these other states, but we should not be the example of what happens when it gets worse.
Thank you.
Yesterday was the one-year anniversary of John Lewis's passing, and so we held a vigil on the Black Lives Matter Plaza in D.C. And I was pondering, having been down with John Lewis on the Edmund Pettus Bridge and thinking about what he'd experienced when he was first on that bridge and was bloodied and beaten because of his advocacy for voting rights. Well, he wants us to carry on. He said that this battle is not a battle of 1 hour or 1 day or 1 week or 1 year or one presidential election or one Supreme Court nomination. It is a battle that is a lifetime of struggle and possibly multiple lifetimes, and that every person in every generation has to carry this fight. Well, little did we know just how significantly we would have to fight to defend the ballot box. I so much appreciate your stories from the front line. Too easy for these things to become academic discussions about the crafting of sometimes difficult to understand laws. But when you hear the direct stories, it illuminates what we're up against. And what you experienced was before this law was passed. And so thank you for being courageous individuals, really freedom fighters. You're fighting what is freedom, but the ability to participate fully in every aspect of society, but particularly the ability to help guide this nation through the ballot box. So we're in partnership with you, and thank you, and let's make sure we win this battle.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you very much. I want to say how happy I am to be back in Georgia. I had a few flashbacks to the debate, the presidential debate. When I got here, it actually went really well here. I very much enjoyed it, and the Tyler Perry studios, and getting to know him a bit. And then I remember the morning where we got, Cory Booker and I got to go see Stacey and see her incredible work and see as she was working to make sure that people weren't kicked off of the voting rolls with the purges and warning them of what was going on in this big room of people calling. It was amazing. And I feel like every time I come here, it's like one cool thing after another. I went to the Civil Rights Museum where we're going to have our hearing tomorrow, sat at that lunch counter. I went to the Jimmy Carter Museum where, like a geek, I looked for Mondale stuff the whole time. Where's Joan's dress, I would say. I went down to Plains and got to see President Carter teach one of his Bible study classes. And then this morning, I got to go with Reverend Warnock to Ebenezer, to his church, and it was Women's Day, so they had guest preachers, and the one that he and I were there for was, well, he went to both, was a woman from Texas and named Claudette Copeland. And she started out, and he and I were sitting next to each other going, it's very relevant to this. She started out, the theme was, you start where you begin. You start where you are. You start where you are. And we are where we are right now. We have had a real bad law pass, but I think we better remember that it was on the heels of this incredible voter turnout in the general election, in the runoff, against all odds, waiting in line for 8 hours, for 5 hours, finding the new precinct even when they change it, figuring out how to do the ballots even when you have to do a PDF of your signature, which I wouldn't really be good at either, Rebecca. And you did that. And so then a bad thing happened, where we start where we are. And that's one of the reasons we're bringing this Rules Committee here and getting out of Washington for the first time in 2 decades, because we got to make the point that you can't just stay and hide behind your desk when there are people looking for us for salvation. They did that in the 60s, and that's how we got some really strong laws on the books on employment discrimination and doing something about education and desegregation and the like, and that time has come again. And it is coming right at us in the form of these 4, as Stacey said, incredible citizens courageous citizens who are the voices for so many. So we're ready to go, and I want to thank Jeff. Oregon's quite a bit away, and he's here. I think Senator Padilla is coming in on a red eye, all the way from California. So, this is really important to all of us. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Very good, you guys. Thank you. Thank you. You guys worked really All right. It's really, really good. I'm so glad you're here. Because we wanted someone from here, and you were.